This is the second part of chapter 8. A man screamed, "Get up! They're trying to sneak it out early!" I jumped straight up and banged my head on the top of the shack. I ran outside. It was still dark, and the fire was just a pile of glowing sticks. The man was screaming at the top of his lungs, "Get up! They've fired the engine and are fixin' to take off!" Bugs and the other boys came and stood next to me. Bugs said, "Is it a raid?" Someone said, "No, they're trying to sneak out before we get up." People started running all over Hooverville. Bug said, "Come on, Bud, get your stuff. We got to get on that train." I folded my blanket up and put it in my suitcase and tied the twine back. I put my jackknife in my pocket, and Bugs and I ran outside. I hadn't got 6 giant steps away when a boy stuck his head out of the door and yelled, "Hey, Slim, is this your paper?" I looked back, my blue flyer. I forgot to put it back in the suitcase. Bug said, "Hurry, I'll wait. I'll catch you. Go ahead." I ran back and took my flyer from the boy. "Thanks a lot." I ran back out into the crowd that was tearing through the woods. There were a million men and boys running in the same direction. I didn't want to fold the flyer up, so I was running. I slid it between the twine and the suitcase. I'd put it back inside once we got to the train. No one was talking. All you could hear were the sounds of a million feet smacking on the trail and the sound of a million people trying to catch their breath. Finally, a hiss sound started, getting louder and louder, and I knew we weren't too far away. We broke out of the woods, and there in the dark sat the train. The locomotive was hissing and spitting cold, black smoke into the sky. Every once in a while, a big shower of sparks would glow up from inside the dark cloud, making it look like a gigantic black genie was trying to raise up out of the smokestack. The train went as far back as you could see, where must have been 1,000 boxcars, but everyone had stopped and just standing there watching. No one was trying to get on. I pushed my way to the front to see if I could find Bugs, and I saw why everyone had stopped. There were 4 cop cars and 8 cops standing between the crowd and the train. The cops all had billy clubs and were spread out to protect the train. The crowd kept getting bigger and bigger. One of the cops yelled, "You men know you can't get on this train. Just go on back to Shantytown and there won't be no trouble." A white man said, "This is the only train going west for the next month. You know we got families to feed and have got to be on it. You go get back in your cars and you'll be right. There won't be no trouble." The cop said, "I'm warning you, the Flint police are on the way. This here is private property and they have ordered to shoot anyone who tries to get on this train." A man next to me said, "I'd rather be shot than sit around and watch my kids go hungry." The cop said, "This is America, boys. You're sounding like a bunch of commies. You know I can't let you on this train. I got kids to feed too, and I'd lose my job." Someone yelled, "Well, welcome to the club, brother." It seemed like we stood looking at the cops and them looking at us for a whole hour. Our side was getting bigger and bigger, and the other cops started looking nervous. The one who was doing all the talking saw them fidgeting and said, "Hold steady, men." One of the cops said, "Jake, there's 400 men out there and more coming. I don't like these odds. Mr. Pinkerton ain't paying me enough to do this." He threw his cop hat and his billy club on the ground. Everybody froze when the train whistle blew one long time and the engine started saying, "Shh, shh, 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 shh." The big steel wheels creaked a couple of times and started moving. 4 of the other cops threw their hats and billy clubs down too. The boss cop said, "You lily-livered rats," and it was like someone said, on your mark, get set, go." The engine was saying, "Shh, shh, 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 shh," and a million boys and men broke for the train. I got pushed from behind and fell on top of my suitcase. Someone reached down and pulled me up. I squeezed my bag to my stomach and ran. The train was going faster and faster. People were jumping on and reaching back to help others. I finally got to the tracks and was running so hard as I could. I looked up into the boxcar and saw Bugs. He screamed, "Bud, throw your bag! Throw me your bag!" I used both hands to throw my suitcase at the train. Bugs caught it, and when he set it behind him, the blue flyer blew out the twine and fluttered outside the door. But it was like a miracle. The flyer flipped over 3 times and landed right in my hand. I slowed down and put it in my pocket. Bugs reached one arm out and screamed, "Bud, don't stop, run!" I started running again, but it felt like my legs were gone. The car with Bugs in it was getting farther and farther away. Finally, I stopped. Bugs was leaning out of the door and stopped reaching back for me. He waved and disappeared into the boxcar. A second later, my suitcase came flying out the door. I walked over to where it landed and picked it up. Man, this is one tough suitcase. You couldn't even tell what it had been through. It still looked exactly the same. I sat on the side of the tracks and tried to catch my breath. The train and my new pretend brother got farther and farther away, chugging to Chicago. Man, I'd found some family, and he was gone before he could really get to know each other. There were 6 or 7 other people who didn't make the train, so we all walked back toward Hooverville. They must have lit the big fire again. The sky in that direction was glowing orange. The cop that first threw down his billy club walked over to us and said he wasn't lying about the Flint police coming, but they're coming to bust up the shanty town. Y'all should get out of here. When we got close to Hooverville, we heard 4 gunshots. We all spread into the woods and sneaked up to see what had happened. I peeked from behind a tree and could see a bunch of cops standing around with pistols out. All the men and boys and women that were left in Hooverville were bunched up on one side, and the cops were on the other. The fire had been lit and was burning bigger than ever, but now it was burning because the cops were tearing all of the shacks down and were throwing the wood and cardboard and hunks of cloth into the middle of it. One of the cops dragged the big clothes washing pot over to the side and stuck his pistol down in it and shot 4 more times. Whew! Instead of shooting people, they were shooting holes into all of their pots and pans. A man was yelling, "You yellow-belly lowlifes! You waited till you knew most of the men was gone, you cowards!" The cops wouldn't talk or nothing. They just kept piling Hoovervilles into the fire. I tried to see if I could spot Deza Malone, but there were too many people. It seemed like the only good thing that came out of going to Hooverville was that I finally kissed a girl. Maybe someone was trying to tell me something. With me missing the train and blue flyer floating back to me, maybe Deza Malone was right. Maybe I should stay here in Flint. I walked back farther into the woods and sat down. I pulled the blue flyer out of my pocket and opened my suitcase back up. I smoothed the flyer and took another good look at it. Maybe it came floating right back to me because this Herman E. Calloway really was my father. Wait a minute, I sat up. The names Caldwell and Calloway are a lot alike. Both of them have 8 letters, and there aren't too many names that have a C, an A, L, A W all together like that. I remember that I read in that little big book, Gangbusters. It said a good criminal chooses an alias that's kind of close to their own name. Except I couldn't figure out who was a criminal here and why anybody needed an alias. I wanted to stay and look for Deza and her mother, but it was too hard to hear all the people crying and arguing. Besides, I was still in the Lamb. I started walking. If I hurried, I could get breakfast at the Mission.